Hey everyone, it's Mr. Silbaugh here, and this is my take on Unit 8, Lesson 2. So, Unit 8, we're covering some more of the advanced features in HTML. Remember, we're not really going into them too in depth. We're just going to be looking at them and saying, hey, this is what an option that you may have if you so choose to in the future. So, in the last lesson, we looked at some of the basic programming vocabulary. Make sure you familiarize yourself with those. And we also talked about some of the many server-side languages in case you're interested. So in this lesson, we're going to be talking about client-side languages. In client-side languages, they are run on the user's computer after the page is downloaded, and the processing is done on the user's computer, and it's not done on the server. So because it's not done on the server, it leaves the server able to do more important things and get the page downloaded quicker. We're going to talk about JavaScript in this lesson, and then VBScript is later. So before we start into client-side languages, let's talk about some issues with it. There are times when it's better to use server-side technologies. If you want to look at those specific issues, I suggest you look back at lesson 1 and make your own conclusions. Some client sides do not support JavaScript or other scripting languages, so you have to be careful about that if you do incorporate JavaScript. The code relies on the client's interpreter. Remember, we covered what the interpreter was in last lesson. So if there's just the interpreter is missing, the code won't be able to validate and it won't be able to run. And another thing is that users may deactivate the script execution in browsers. So what that means is the process of being able to run the script is disabled. Sometimes it's disabled by the user's choice, it could be disabled by accident, but one of the things that they do mention in the text is that some companies actually make the employees disable it, or it's disabled automatically in order to protect the security of the organization. So if your page needs client-side scripts, then they may not appear for some people in your audience. So be very careful when you do this and who you market your web page to if you do use a client-side language. So JavaScript. JavaScript is an object-based scripting language, and it allows interactivity in web pages. It can be used on the client side or on the server side. It's flexible like that. On the client side, JavaScript must be in the HTML documents to run, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So some things that you can potentially add with this, you can add pop-up windows such as alerts, prompts like enter your information, things of that nature. Date and time changes, images and text that change just when moused over, cookie creation, and more. This is just a very basic list. So scripting languages are used within a program to extend it, and the syntax is similar to C. We didn't really talk about C. It was mentioned very briefly last lesson, but if you are interested in C, I suggest you do your own search. Code is in a web document, so when your browser accesses a page with the JavaScript, it can run the appropriate programs, and it does what's programmed. So in your HTML document, you would embed the JavaScript, and then when it loads on your page, it's able to run. So JavaScript is object-based, and it's not object-oriented. So the difference between object-based and object-oriented is it does not support inheritance. Inheritance was talked about in the last lesson. Object-based has 3 major built-in objects, and you want to know these 3 built-in objects. Document, navigator, and array. Document is that obtains the values and it writes the values. The navigator determines the type of the browser, and the array creates a series of variables for later manipulation. There are courses on this. This is just a very basic overview. So some of the advantages of JavaScript, there are several. One of the ones that they push is quick development. It's not time-consuming. Most interface features are taken care of by the HTML code. So since you do embed it into the HTML code, it's rather simple. And programmers do not have to create the elements. The elements are already created for you. You just have to code them in. And it's easy to learn. It's similar to Java, but the syntax is very simple. And there's also platform independence. So it's not specific to any operating system. It can be used regardless of the operating system you use. So you may be wondering Java versus JavaScript. They are totally different things. Java is object-oriented, and it can be used to create standalone applications, and it's not just necessarily embedded into a website. And there are many applications called applets. So Java and JavaScript. JavaScript is essentially the code in web design, and Java is used. It could be used to create applications and applets outside of web design. So the way that you embed JavaScript, it's embedded using HTML. It uses the script tag, and it's not restricted to the body tag, so it can go pretty much anywhere in your HTML document. So you can communicate to the user with the alert and the prompt functions, and these are properties of the window document. This allows you to, an alert would be a message that pops up and says, hey, you need to do this, and a prompt would ask for more information. It can use document.write to output text in the user's window. So if it says document.write, it's going to write whatever the user has put in, or whatever the code has said to write. An alert displays an alert, and a prompt requests the user input, and you can do a dialogue in this case, which means that you can create a script of things to say in response to the alert or what the prompt says. All right, so this is an example of JavaScript in HTML. So right here, this is the code, and then your JavaScript code would go right here. Notice that it's outside of the body. It's in the head section, actually, and that's okay too. It can go either way, either place. So external JavaScript, we can also make JavaScript files that are external from the HTML document. It can be used in external files, and it would use the .js extension. Think of your CSS files, how those are separate, how you can create an external style sheet. Same thing with this, but remember you need to be able to link it together. It's useful when it's used with multiple web pages. Think of your CSS benefits. It allows for consistency and shorter code segments, and if it's across the entire website, it's more uniform, and as usual, one change to the file allows for multiple changes across the pages. But it can be slower because the code is outside of the page and on the server, so be careful about that. So on this slide, we have an example of an external JavaScript sample. So it's kind of similar to what the previous slide was that showed the JavaScript sample, only on this one it shows an external. The way that it works is that you put your script source equal and then script.js. Remember, you would create this in an external page that's on the same part of the server, and make sure you would link it correctly, otherwise your page would not work. So again, this can be put inside of the head as well as the body. So one of the things that JavaScript is able to do is what's called browser detection, and you're going to be doing this in the lab. So code can be written for this process, and it's useful to present different versions of a site in different browsers. Plus, you can create some unique experiences and some different things. Like if one is not a supported browser version, you can remind people to upgrade their browser to the latest version. This is more if you're looking for a job that's internal and needs everyone to be on the same page and have the same browser at the same time. It's also useful for accessibility. Cookies, and not the kind you eat. Cookies can be used with JavaScript to be stored on the user's hard drive. It can be used for cookie creation and storing passwords, user preferences, and which web pages will be displayed based upon browser versions. It's useful to create cookies, but it does create a security issue, so be careful with that. And it can be used for copyright protection. So if someone copies the script, if the cookies are not recognized or not there, they're missing, it can be completely altered and say, hey, you can't use this website because it has been stolen. So interesting little thing to keep in mind. So we're at the end of this lesson. In review, remember that JavaScript is a very useful client-side language. As you notice, it was pretty much the whole topic of today's lesson. Client-side languages are accessed on a user's computer and not on the server, and JavaScript can be used for things such as cookies, browser detection, alerts, and more. This concludes this lesson. Make sure you complete your checkpoint, and there are 2 labs for this lesson as well.